Scott Pelley will land. Frankly, I hope he lands right here.
Yeah.
I hope he stays on. I hope he's on TV tomorrow.
Right.
And I hope that everybody in journalism and everybody who values a free press figures out ways to outmaneuver the people who are trying to take the free press from us.
Our colleague Rachel Maddow speaking, frankly, for many in her reaction to what was breaking news last night. A long-time, 30-plus year veteran of CBS News and 60 Minutes in the anchor chair, Scott Pelley, out. CBS firing him over what he says was standing up for journalism against bias and politicizing their work. What 60 Minutes becomes is, in a sense, a question tonight. There's a question about whether the owners of this new CBS company, which is making larger mergers, are allied with MAGA and putting a thumb on the scale, or whether this is also part of a larger effort to curry favor with the Trump administration, which oversees the big business tech merger. Pelley, who is as credible as they come when you look at his long tenure of independent reporting, including from war zones and multiple administrations, says CBS News management instructed him to inject falsehoods and bias into a politically sensitive story. He calls out what he views as incompetence and unprofessionalism in the new management that wreaked havoc, describing scenarios that were completely avoidable, according to him, that put stories in danger going up to airtime. He has a lot of experience here to launch these critiques, and he says it's all to curry favor with the Trump administration. MS Now has requested CBS comment on those accusations. We haven't specifically heard back, although some of their officials have spoken out publicly, and there's been a war of words in the press over what is a big and rare inflection point in already a long-running battle over CBS News independence and whether freedom of speech or Colbert-style criticism of the current government would be allowed for long on that platform. Pelley also criticized the CBS News boss, Barry Weiss. There was a staff meeting where Pelley confronted the new executive producer about Weiss. This is something that broke in the New York Times yesterday. There is reportedly a recording that the Times says they have of this unusually tense meeting where he said that she was trying to murder 60 Minutes. She does not love this place, he said. That was in response to a back and forth. She was brought in to kill it, and she's been doing exactly that. Now, there are reports that Weiss was telling staff that Pelley was violating trust and mutual respect. And for her part, she and others say that they tried to reach out to him, including before that tense meeting I just mentioned, for a one-on-one discussion, that there was a back and forth and clearly a breakdown of an ability to get through issues that Pelley thinks go beyond communication and to the heart of how that news division is being gutted. I don't have to tell you, if you're watching this news channel, you've probably seen news over the past decades. Pelley is someone who reported from war zones, who faced politicians and presidents who covered the White House, and most recently as well, the war in Ukraine.
How would you say your mental focus is?
Oh, it's focused. I haven't. Look.
Behind me, you can see what's left of one of the 110-story Twin Towers. How do you dig this up?
Piece by piece, hand by hand.
Tonight, we have details of a classified U.S. intelligence mission that has obtained a previously unknown weapon. Everything America is trying to accomplish in Afghanistan is represented in these 4 tents.
How do you measure success? We sat down with Zelensky in his hometown. It had been a week since Russia killed 9 children on a playground.
As a viewer, I've never spent any time with Scott Pelley. I've watched him. As a journalist, I can echo what Rachel and plenty of other journalists have said, which is this is really one of the long-term gold standards of what a TV journalist can be. And that independence, whether you saw him there pressing then-President Biden on one of his perceived vulnerabilities, or going to war zones, as I mentioned, or just calling it free and fair. And 60 Minutes relied on Pelley. Over the years, they've had different stars, but he was currently one of their most prominent. So it means something when he says, after trying to work with this new management for months, that it has become untenable and that he has specific concerns, examples of what he calls their bias and effort to promote falsehoods at that institution. Now, there is another version of this story you'll hear, which is that some of the broadcast media has fallen behind, has lost a step, and needs to be modernized, and that itself is not illicit. Well, that's true as far as it goes. If you watch this program, we've reported on the shifts in digital media a ton, but 60 Minutes didn't need some sudden overhaul to reach the public. It was a commercial success. Indeed, Paramount, which is the parent company, recently noted how 60 Minutes made history by marking 52 straight seasons as America's #1 news program, with as many as 10 million people watching, Variety reports. When you look at those Nielsen ratings, there were weeks where the top thing watched in all categories would be football and 60 Minutes. It was #1 in news and rivaled some of the other most profitable things on the air. And yet lately, these accusations of bias were mounting. One correspondent said there was a, quote, political decision by the bosses to try to shape and delay an immigration report that might have upset Trump officials. Another 60 Minutes correspondent said, quote, my producing teams and I have experienced efforts to insert political bias into our stories. CBS has repeatedly denied those accusations during this period. The wider context is David Ellison, who is part of that Ellison family that we've mentioned that has been buying up media. Paramount is the company involved here. And the wider thing that goes beyond just news is that they need the Trump administration's approval for that huge Warner merger with so much money on the line. Broader than CBS News, you have a Trump administration that has gone farther than any other U.S. government to target and sue and intimidate and sometimes use executive orders and other powers and even indict Don Lemon, reminding you of just some of what they're doing here, including these lawsuits. This is the environment we're in. And if you needed an inflection point beyond Colbert, beyond the lawsuits, beyond this or that reporter telling you they're doing it again, someone like Pelley saying out in the open at the risk of his career and whatever money was left on his contract and everything else, saying out in the open, they are doing this for the Trump government. What they're doing is false. What they're doing is wrong. That's your inflection point. We're joined by Ken Auletta, renowned journalist, author, writer for The New Yorker. He's written many national bestsellers you see here, often looking at the intersection of media and its role in society, which is why we thought of you tonight. Welcome.
Thanks, Harry.
What does this mean for 60 Minutes and CBS News? How rare is it to see this spill out the way it's happening over the last 48 hours?
Well, you know, you look at the history of mergers. Take Time Warner when AOL acquired it. And AOL comes in, they say, you guys suck. You're Luddites, you know, this and all, and alienates all the Time Warner people. Something similar has happened right here. The people from Paramount are coming in, Ari Weiss coming in and saying, you guys suck. You're Luddites. We have to make changes. Now, you do have to. You said this earlier in the introduction. They do have to make changes. The audience is aging at 60 Minutes and at all of newscasts. And the audience is declining as more choices proliferate. So you have to try and upgrade 60 Minutes and news. But you don't come in and say, you guys suck, and insult people and summarily fire them, which is what they've done. So they've created a place at CBS News where people are unhappy and they're going to leave and they won't work as hard. They don't have the trust that you need when companies merge. And by the way, it's not just CBS. If they get Trump's approval, they're going to take over CNN too. And how does that radiate out to CNN? So it's really a huge problem. They've really mishandled this.
Yeah, you say the new owners have mishandled it. I mentioned to viewers who probably know that Mr. Pelley is pretty serious when it comes to the life and career he's led on behalf of independent journalism. So him saying this doesn't read to me, what do you think, as just another employment dispute?
It's not another employment dispute. You know, one of the things, I mean, as a watcher of your show, you talk about Republican senators and members of Congress who don't speak up. And here's Scott Pelley speaking up and daring to speak up, and putting his job on the line to speak up and speak what he sees as the truth. And so he deserves a lot of credit for his courage to do that and to risk his career, which he's done. Now, I'm sure he has communicated, he has misunderstood certain things that these people, they don't want to destroy 60 Minutes. They don't want to destroy CBS News. But nevertheless, the message that they've conveyed is one of destruction. And Scott Pelley is standing up for the people he's worked with for years and he admires. And He's gone, and several other correspondents are gone. The longtime executive producer of 60 Minutes was summarily fired, as was her deputy. So this radiates out in a very negative way.
Yeah, and it seems the MAGA owners want the power and reach of 60 Minutes, the audience and the credibility. But according to so many people who built that, these MAGA owners don't want to do the hard work, the compromise, and the independence of that. And so they're running into that. It's one thing to say, let's widen our story selection, or let's do more stories about rural America, or the things you sometimes hear, and you go, okay, go let the 60 Minutes people do it that way. That's not it. We're hearing about, and I want to put up on the screen that we have some evidence here, and they cannot answer it. But this is the evidence from, again, a very credible source in Mr. Pelly. He says they instructed him, the new management, to inject falsehoods and bias into the reporting. He says that politicians have now been invited to choose the correspondents for interviews, basically handing the government a kind of oversight role, and then, of course, picking perhaps their favorites. He describes how incompetence and unprofessionalism wreaked havoc. In one of his stories, he says, quote, the entire program came within 19 minutes of not getting on the air at all. That point, as you'll understand, Ken, and many other people won't know all the details, is, folks watch a show, they say, Ari pulls up around 6, talk to some people and leave. Hey, if that's what it looks like, great. In fact, anyone who's worked in the challenge of TV news knows there's a huge team. Most of them aren't visible on air, and they do a lot of work. And if you want to have an editorial discussion about changing a story on a magazine-style weekly show like 60 Minutes, and you're at all competent, Ken, you do that with advanced time in the proper way. And he is suggesting, and there's been other independent reporting on this, that these new executives don't even know how to put a show together. And then he adds on top of that, they want him to put a show out that he said was false, and he resisted.